Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Radio Theater. I'm your host, and I'm so glad you're here with me tonight. You know, we spend more time at work than almost anywhere else in our lives. In those offices, cubicles, and conference rooms, we experience some of our highest highs and lowest lows. We find friendship, frustration, purpose, and sometimes silence. Tonight, we have two stories from the workplace. Two very different experiences, but both asking the same question. What happens when the place we spend most of our waking hours doesn't see us the way we need to be seen? So settle in, get comfortable, and let's listen together. Our first story tonight is called The Boss's Door. Dear Radio Theater, I'm writing to you from my office desk, long after everyone else has gone home. It's 9:47 p.m. on a Thursday. The cleaning crew just passed by my cubicle for the second time tonight, and Rosa, she's been working this building for 12 years, gave me that look again. The one that says, Misho, go home. Whatever you're working on can wait. But it's not really about the work. It's never really about the work. The glow of this computer screen feels different when the room is empty, colder somehow. The fluorescent lights above my boss's office are still on, even though he left at 5:30, creating this rectangle of light that I can see from here. His door, always closed, even when he's not there. Tonight, I don't want to write about deadlines or spreadsheets or quarterly targets. I want to write about my boss, about what it's like to work for someone who isn't cruel, isn't even particularly difficult, but somehow makes you question everything you thought you knew about yourself. His name is Richard, 53 years old, married, 2 kids in college. He brings in donuts on Fridays. He asks about my weekend on Monday mornings. He remembered my birthday last month and signed the card that HR passed around. He is, by all measurable standards, a decent man. But to me, he is also a wall. Let me tell you what it's like to present an idea to Richard. You prepare for days, you run the numbers, anticipate the questions, rehearse your pitch in the bathroom mirror like you're defending a dissertation. You walk into his office with this spark of hope, maybe this time, maybe this idea, maybe finally he'll see what I'm capable of. And you lay it all out. Charts, projections, implementation timeline, everything. And he listens. He does. He leans back in that chair that squeaks slightly to the left, steeples his fingers under his chin, nods occasionally. His face gives nothing away. You finish your pitch, and there's this moment of silence that feels like it stretches for hours but is probably only 5 seconds-y. Then he says one of 3 things. Interesting. Let me think about it. Or, I'm not sure the timing is right. Or, good thought, but I don't think we have the bandwidth. And that's it. The idea vanishes into that space between his frown and his sigh like you never spoke at all. He doesn't shout. He doesn't criticize. He doesn't tear your idea apart with logic or reasoning. He just absorbs it. And nothing changes. The door closes, literally and figuratively. 3 years. I've worked for Richard for 3 years. I've pitched 17 major ideas in formal meetings. 17. I kept count because at some point I needed to know I wasn't imagining it. 0 have been implemented. 0. Meanwhile, Brad, who joined the team 6 months after me, pitched an idea last month that was almost identical to something I'd suggested a year ago. Word for word, I could show you the emails. Richard called it innovative and exactly the kind of forward thinking we need. They're rolling it out next quarter. There's a task force. Brad's leading it. When I mentioned to Richard that the concept sounded familiar, that I'd proposed something similar, he paused, tilted his head slightly and said, "Oh, did you? I don't recall. But great minds think alike, right?" And he smiled. He actually smiled like he was being generous. I used to go home angry after days like that. I'd sit in traffic on the 405, gripping the steering wheel, rehearsing arguments I'd never have the courage to speak aloud. I'd lie awake at 2 a.m. constructing the perfect response, the devastating rebuttal, the speech that would finally make him see me, really see me and understand what he was overlooking. I wanted to prove myself, to show him that I wasn't just another replaceable employee, just another name on his team roster, just another person who could be dismissed without consequence. But here's what happened instead. The anger turned into something quieter, something more dangerous. It turned into doubt. I started second-guessing every idea before I even voiced it. Is this actually good or am I delusional? Maybe he's right to ignore my suggestions. Maybe I'm not as smart as I thought I was. Maybe I'm missing something obvious that everyone else can see. I started staying later, working harder, volunteering for the difficult projects nobody wanted. I thought if I just did more, was more visible, contributed more tangibly, eventually the silence would break. Eventually he'd have to notice. It didn't work. Last month I had my annual performance review. Richard opened the folder, glanced at the form he'd filled out, and slid it across the desk to me. Meets expectations, he'd written. In every single category. Solid performer. Reliable. No major concerns. I scanned down to the comments section, looking for something specific, something I could work with. There was one sentence, should work on taking more initiative in team settings. I almost laughed. Almost. Because what is presenting 17 ideas if not initiative? What is staying until 10 p.m. 3 nights a week, if not commitment? What is volunteering for every tight deadline, every thankless task, every crisis that needs solving if not taking initiative? But I didn't laugh. I didn't say anything. I nodded, thanked him for his feedback, shook his hand, and went back to my desk. And I sat there for 20 minutes just staring at my monitor, not seeing anything. That's when I realized the most dangerous thing a boss can give you is not criticism. It's silence. Because criticism you can work with. Criticism tells you what's wrong so you can fix it. Criticism at least acknowledges that you exist, that your efforts register, that someone is paying enough attention to have an opinion. But silence makes you disappear. It turns you into background noise, into wallpaper, into someone who's there but not really there. Silence tells you that nothing you do matters enough to warrant a response, positive or negative. You're just neutral, forgettable. And the worst part? You can't fight silence. You can't argue with it. You can't prove it wrong. You can't even really complain about it without sounding petty or needy. My boss doesn't pay attention to me sounds like a child whining. My ideas are ignored sounds like ego. I feel invisible sounds weak. So you stay quiet. And the silence multiplies. It grows. It starts living inside you. It becomes the voice in your head that says, why bother? Nothing you say matters anyway. But here's the thing, and this is why I'm writing to you tonight. I'm still here. Despite everything I just described, I stay. And I've been trying to understand why. It's not the salary. I could make more elsewhere. I've been approached by recruiters. It's not the benefits or the commute or the company's reputation. It's something else. Something I didn't see clearly until recently. Last Tuesday, I was helping Jennifer from accounting. She's new, only been here 6 weeks, and she was drowning in a reconciliation that made absolutely no sense. The formatting was wrong, the formulas were broken, and she was close to tears because it was due the next morning. I sat with her for an hour after work, my after work, which means it was already 7 p.m., and walked her through the entire process, showed her the shortcuts, explained why the system was set up in this backwards way. That makes everything harder than it should be, rebuilt half the spreadsheet with her watching, so she'd know how to do it herself next time. When we finished, she looked at me with this expression of pure relief and said, "You're a really good teacher. Like, you should do this professionally. You made something that felt impossible seem totally doable." And she meant it. I could see it in her face. It wasn't politeness. It was genuine gratitude. Or 3 weeks ago, we have this client, Victoria, difficult doesn't even begin to describe her, who called with an emergency during her vacation in Tuscany. Her entire quarterly report file had corrupted, and she needed it for a board meeting the Monday she got back. It was Saturday afternoon. I spent 4 hours reconstructing the whole thing from backup data and archived emails. When she came back, she sent me a bottle of expensive wine and a handwritten note that said, "You saved my life." Literally. I don't know what we'd do without you. You're the reason I can actually take vacations. Or last month, when Marcus from the product development team stopped by my desk and said, "Hey, I heard you're the person to talk to about forecasting models. Got 5 minutes?" Those 5 minutes turned into 45. We went deep into methodology, use cases, common pitfalls. At the end, he leaned back and said, "Man, you should be leading a team." Seriously, why aren't you leading a team? I didn't have an answer for him. I still don't. But those moments, Jennifer's gratitude, Victoria's relief, Marcus's genuine respect, those are the moments that keep me here. Those are the reasons I haven't left. Because beyond Richard's closed door, beyond his silence and his indifference and his inability or unwillingness to see what I bring, there is still meaning in this work. There are still people who notice, who thank me, who need what I know and value what I do. These small victories don't show up in performance reviews. They don't come with raises or promotions or public recognition in team meetings. Richard will never know about them because I don't report them and he doesn't ask. But they're real. They matter. They remind me that a person's worth isn't measured by one manager's gaze. I've been thinking a lot lately about what success actually means. When I was in college, success meant getting hired. When I first started working, success meant getting good at the job, becoming indispensable. Then it meant getting promoted, getting Richard's job eventually, moving up the ladder. But now I'm not sure what it means anymore. Is success Victoria being able to take a vacation without panicking? Is it Jennifer, walking away from my desk feeling capable instead of overwhelmed? Is it Marcus, seeing something in me that my own boss doesn't see? Or is success supposed to be that closed door finally opening? Richard finally saying, "You know what? You were right. That idea from 8 months ago? Let's do it." I don't know. I honestly don't know. What I do know is this: I'm tired. Not physically, though I am that too. I'm tired of trying to be seen. Tired of hoping that this meeting, this project, this perfectly executed deadline will be the thing that finally registers. Tired of the mental gymnastics I do to convince myself that being overlooked doesn't hurt. It does hurt. It hurts to work this hard and be described as someone who meets expectations. It hurts to watch Brad present my idea and get applause. It hurts to see that light under Richard's door and know that even if I knocked right now, even if I had the best idea of my entire career, that door probably wouldn't open. Not really. So why am I writing this letter? Why am I sitting here at 9:47 p.m., now 10:13 actually, telling all of this to strangers on the radio? Because I think many of us carry these stories in silence. We tell ourselves it's just work, just a paycheck, just another day to get through. We minimize the hurt because we're supposed to be professional, supposed to be tough, supposed to not let it get to us. Don't take it personally, everyone says. It's just business. But work is where we spend most of our waking hours. The voices we hear there, or don't hear, shape the way we see ourselves, whether we want them to or not. And I've been letting Richard's silence become my inner voice. I've been measuring my worth by a closed door instead of by all the doors I've helped other people open. I'm learning, slowly, painfully, to separate my reflection from his silence, to listen to Jennifer's thanks instead of Richard's indifference, to remember Victoria's relief instead of my 17 ignored proposals, to hold on to Marcus's question, "Why aren't you leading a team?" instead of Richard's assessment that I merely meet expectations. I'm learning that maybe the problem isn't me. Maybe Richard is just one person with his own limitations, his own blind spots, his own reasons for not seeing what's right in front of him. Maybe he's intimidated. Maybe he's just bad at his job. Maybe he genuinely doesn't see it. I don't know, and I'm starting to think it doesn't matter. What matters is that I don't need him to see me. I need to see myself. I don't know what comes next. Some days I think about leaving, about finding a boss who actually listens, a workplace where initiative is met with response instead of silence. Other days I think about staying, about finding my validation in the work itself and in the people it helps, regardless of whether Richard ever notices. Both options scare me. Leaving feels like admitting defeat. Staying feels like accepting something I shouldn't accept. So for now, I sit here in this empty office, writing letters to radio shows, trying to figure out who I am beyond Richard's closed door. What I do know is this: if anyone listening tonight has felt small beneath the shadow of a boss's silence, you are not alone. If you've doubted yourself because someone in authority couldn't or wouldn't acknowledge your worth, it's not just you. If you've stayed late at an empty office wondering why you keep trying when nobody's watching, I understand. I'm here too, and I want you to know that the voices that matter, the gratitude of colleagues like Jennifer, the relief of clients like Victoria, the respect of people like Marcus who see clearly what others miss, and the quiet pride in your own heart when you solve a problem nobody else could solve. Those voices are real too. Sometimes they speak louder than any office door. I'm learning to measure my worth differently. I'm learning that being unseen by one person doesn't make me invisible. I'm learning that I don't need Richard's validation to know I'm good at what I do. Some days I believe that, some days I don't. But I'm trying, and maybe that's enough for now. With respect, a worker learning to measure his worth differently. That was a story from a worker learning to measure his worth differently. You know what I hear in your letter? I hear someone waking up, someone who's starting to ask the right questions, even if the answers are still unclear. Here's the truth you already know, but maybe need permission to say out loud: Richard isn't going to change. that door isn't going to open. 3 years, 17 ideas, countless late nights, that's enough data. You're not waiting for things to get better. You're waiting for permission to accept that they won't. But here's what strikes me most. You're already living the answer you're looking for. Jennifer, Victoria, Marcus, they're not consolation prizes. They're not lesser than. They're showing you something essential. Your value exists whether or not Richard sees it. The question isn't, why doesn't Richard see me? That's his limitation, not your problem to solve. The real question is, how much longer are you willing to let one person's blindness define your worth? You said both leaving and staying scare you. That's because you're framing them wrong. Leaving isn't admitting defeat. It's choosing yourself. It's saying, I'm too valuable to keep trying to convince someone who isn't paying attention. And staying isn't accepting defeat either, if, and this is critical, if you stop seeking Richard's validation and start building your career around the people who actually see you. Here's my challenge. Stop writing Richard's story. You've spent 3 years trying to be the protagonist in his narrative, but you're the main character in your own story. Jennifer, Victoria, Marcus, they're your supporting cast. Richard's just background noise. So what does your story look like when you stop waiting for his approval? What happens when you invest that energy in people who value you? Pursue opportunities with people who listen. You deserve a boss who responds to your ideas, either with enthusiasm or with specific, actionable feedback. You deserve a workplace where staying late is appreciated, not overlooked. You deserve to stop performing for an audience of one who isn't watching. That door is closed. And maybe it's time to stop knocking and find a door that's already open. Sometimes the closed door belongs to someone above us. But what happens when the distance isn't about hierarchy? It's about something else entirely. Something quieter, more subtle, but just as isolating. Our second story tonight is called The Cubicle Next Door. Dear Radio Theater, her name was Patricia. Cubicle next to mine for 7 years. 7 years of sharing a thin divider wall, of hearing each other's phone calls, of existing in each other's peripheral vision every single workday. We weren't friends exactly. We never hung out after work, never texted on weekends, didn't have each other's phone numbers. We never grabbed lunch together or knew each other's spouses' names or got invited to each other's birthday parties. But we were something I don't have a word for. I knew her voice before I knew her face. On my first day at this company, before I'd even been shown to my desk, I heard her on the phone with a customer. Patient and kind, even though they were being completely unreasonable, demanding things that weren't possible, speaking to her like she was personally responsible for every inconvenience in their life. And her voice stayed calm, warm even. I understand your frustration. Let me see what I can do. Give me 10 minutes and I'll call you back with some options. I remember standing there with my box of desk supplies, listening, thinking, okay, if she can handle that with grace, maybe I can survive here. Over the years, we developed this rhythm, this unspoken language of proximity. She'd bring in those butter cookies from the Korean bakery every few weeks. Her daughter worked there on weekends, and she'd always leave a small stack on my desk without saying anything. Just set them down while I was in a meeting or at lunch. No note, no announcement. I'd do the same with coffee. When I noticed her voice getting tight on a call, or when I heard her sigh in that particular way that meant she was overwhelmed, I'd quietly get up, make her a coffee the way she liked it, 1 cream, no sugar, and just set it on her desk. Walk away without a word. We never made a big deal of it. That was the thing. Everything between us was quiet, almost invisible to anyone watching. But it was there. We never ate lunch together. She brought the same thing every day, leftovers from whatever her family had for dinner, and ate at her desk while reading news articles on her phone. I usually went to the deli across the street and ate while walking around the block. But we had this thing where if one of us had a rough morning, the other would quietly slide a funny article or a stupid meme across the divider. No words. Just, I see you're having a day. Here's something small to help. I knew things about her life. Not because she sat me down and told me, but because I heard it. 7 years of phone calls. Her daughter, Emily, was applying to colleges. I heard every conversation about essays and campus visits and financial aid. I heard Patricia encourage her, worry about her, try to guide her without being overbearing. You have to choose what's right for you, honey, not what you think we want. Her husband, David, worked night shifts at a warehouse. They barely saw each other. Ships passing. I heard her call him every night at midnight, right before his lunch break. How's it going? Did you eat? I left the pasta in the fridge. Don't forget to heat it up properly this time. She was taking care of her mother, who had dementia and lived in a nursing home across town. Those calls were the hardest to overhear. "Hi, Mom. It's Patricia, your daughter. I know. I'll come visit this weekend." "Yes, I promise." Sometimes her voice would crack, just slightly, almost imperceptibly, but I heard it. And sometimes when she'd hang up from a particularly hard call, I'd hear her take this deep breath. This long, shaky breath like she was putting herself back together. And I'd quietly clear my throat or shuffle some papers just so she'd know someone was there. Just so she'd know she wasn't alone. She did the same for me when I was going through my divorce. When I was on the phone with lawyers, with my ex-wife, with my daughter who didn't understand why Daddy wasn't coming home anymore. Patricia never said anything directly. But I'd come back from those calls and find a fresh coffee on my desk. Or one of those butter cookies. Or sometimes just a sticky note that said, "Hang in there." We witnessed each other's lives in this strange, sideways way. 7 years of listening through a cubicle wall. 7 years of small gestures that said, "I see you. You're not invisible." I knew when she was happy because she'd hum while she worked. Old songs, ones I didn't recognize but that had this quality of contentment. I knew when she was anxious because she'd tap her pen, 3 quick taps, pause, 3 more. I knew when she was really focused because she'd go completely silent. Not even the sound of breathing, just intense concentration. She knew my patterns too. She knew I always arrived exactly at 8:47 a.m., never earlier, never later. She knew I took calls from my daughter on Thursdays at 2 p.m., our weekly check-in. She knew I got restless around 3 p.m. and would get up to walk around the building. Once I was late coming back from lunch, traffic, long line at the deli, and I heard her on the phone with someone saying, "No, he's not at his desk right now. He's usually back by 1:15, so probably any minute." She knew my schedule better than I did. 7 years of these tiny, invisible conversations. 7 years of this quiet companionship that wasn't friendship but was something real nonetheless. Last month she retired. 65. "Time to go," she said. Time to travel with David now that he'd retired too. Time to spend real hours with Emily, who'd just had her first baby. Time to be with her mother while she still remembered who Patricia was, at least some days. There was a party in the break room. Nothing fancy. Sheet cake from the grocery store, card that everyone signed, weak coffee in paper cups. The VP came down and said some generic things about Patricia's years of service and dedication. People clapped politely. I signed the card. I ate a piece of cake. I shook her hand and said congratulations. And the whole time I felt this weird panic rising in my chest that I couldn't explain. Her last day was a Friday. I knew because HR had sent the announcement email. I'd been avoiding thinking about it, honestly. What does it mean when someone who's been part of your daily landscape for 7 years just isn't anymore? At 4:30, she started packing up her personal things. Photos of Emily, of her mother from before the dementia. A small plant that somehow survived in our fluorescent-lit dungeon. I heard her opening drawers, the rustle of packing materials. At 4:55, she stopped by my desk. Just stood there until I looked up from my computer. We stood there awkwardly for a moment. What do you say to someone who isn't quite a friend but isn't quite not a friend either? She spoke first. "Thank you for the coffee. All those times. It helped more than you know." I said, "Thank you for the cookies. And everything else." We both laughed, a little uncomfortable, a little sad. Then she did something she'd never done before. She hugged me. Brief, a little stiff, but genuine. "Take care of yourself," she said. "You too," I said. And she left. Just like that. 7 years, and it ended with a 30-second goodbye. Now there's a new person in that cubicle. His name is Tyler. 24, just out of college, eager and friendly. He introduced himself on his first day, asked about the team, the culture, what I thought of the company. He listens to podcasts with headphones on, eats lunch at his desk while watching videos on his phone, takes calls on speakerphone, which drives me insane. He doesn't know that I'm divorced. Doesn't know my daughter's name. Doesn't know that I hate Monday morning meetings because they stress me out for the whole weekend. And I realize I lost something I didn't know I had. Patricia wasn't just a coworker. She was a witness to 7 years of my life. The mundane, daily parts that nobody else sees or cares about. The small struggles and tiny victories and ordinary moments that actually make up most of living. She knew what my frustrated sigh sounded like. She knew how I talked to my daughter. She knew my coffee order and my schedule and the particular way I typed when I was on a deadline, fast, aggressive, like I was angry at the keyboard. And I was the same for her. I witnessed her life too. I heard her be a mother, a daughter, a wife. I heard her be patient with difficult people and worried about her family and proud of her daughter's accomplishments. I heard her be human in all the small, real ways. I can't call her. I don't have her number. I wouldn't even know what to say. Hey, remember how we never really talked but somehow understood each other? Remember how you left cookies on my desk? And I left coffee on yours and somehow that was enough? It sounds ridiculous when I try to put it into words. But I miss her. I miss the small acknowledgments, the quiet companionship, the sense that someone was paying attention to my ordinary life and treating it like it mattered. I miss knowing I was doing the same for someone else. The office feels different now. Not worse exactly. Just lonelier. Empty. Like something essential has been removed and I'm only now realizing it was holding things together. And I'm realizing that some relationships don't fit into the categories we have. Patricia wasn't a friend in any traditional sense. She wasn't family. She wasn't a romantic interest. She was something we don't have a word for. Someone who shared space with you, who witnessed your life, who made the daily grind of existence feel less isolating. I've been thinking about how much of life is like this. These relationships that exist in the margins that don't get acknowledged or celebrated but are somehow essential. The barista who knows your order. The bus driver who waits an extra second when they see you running. The security guard who says good morning every day like he really means it. We move through the world surrounded by witnesses. People who see us in small ways, who acknowledge our existence, who remind us that we're not alone, even when we are. Patricia was my witness. For 7 years, someone noticed when I arrived late, when I was having a hard day, when I needed a coffee or a stupid joke, or just the presence of another human being on the other side of a thin wall. And now she's gone. And I didn't know how to tell her what that meant. I didn't know how to say thank you for something that was never officially acknowledged, never given a name, never formalized into something we could talk about directly. I guess I'm writing because I want to acknowledge it now. Even if she never hears this, even if it sounds silly to everyone else, what we had mattered. She mattered. Those butter cookies and quiet coffees and stupid memes and the knowledge that someone was listening, they mattered. I want anyone listening tonight who has their own Patricia to know those relationships count. They're real. You're not silly for caring about them. The person who sits next to you, who you never quite become friends with, but who somehow knows you anyway, they're important. And if you lost your Patricia, if there's someone who was part of your daily life who isn't anymore, it's okay to miss them. It's okay to grieve that loss even if no one else understands why it hurts. How do you thank someone for being present, for paying attention, for making you feel less alone in a cubicle farm, where everyone's just trying to make it through the day? I don't know, but I'm trying to figure it out. Maybe it starts with acknowledging it, with saying out loud, this mattered. You mattered. Patricia, if you somehow hear this, thank you. Thank you for the cookies and the quiet companionship and for witnessing 7 years of my ordinary life and treating it like it was worth paying attention to. And to everyone else, pay attention to the people around you, the ones in the margins of your life, the ones you share space with but never quite connect to in conventional ways. Notice them. Acknowledge them. Leave them a cookie sometimes. Because we're all just trying to get through the day. And it's so much easier when we know someone's listening, someone's watching, someone cares that we're here. With gratitude, someone who misses his cubicle neighbor. That was a story from someone who misses his cubicle neighbor. You know what's beautiful about your story? You just named something that most people experience but never acknowledge. That quiet companionship. That sideways witnessing. That relationship that doesn't have a label but is somehow essential anyway. Our culture is obsessed with big relationships, best friends, romantic partners, family. We make movies about them, write songs about them, celebrate them. But we completely overlook these quiet, daily relationships that actually shape so much of our experience. You spent more waking hours next to Patricia than you probably spent with most of your actual friends. You witnessed each other's real lives, not the highlight reel, not the curated version, the actual texture of daily existence. The stress calls, the small victories, the humming and sighing and moments of joy and struggle. That wasn't nothing. That was profound. And here's what I want you to know: you can reach out. You said you don't have her number, but you work for the same company. LinkedIn exists. The HR directory exists. You could find her. Not to force some friendship that wouldn't fit outside that context, but just to say what you said here. Thank you for witnessing my life. Those cookies mattered. That quiet companionship mattered. You mattered. I think she'd want to know that. I think it would mean something to her to understand that what you had wasn't just in your head, that it was real and mutual and important. And here's the other thing. You now know something valuable. You know that these small daily acts of attention and care matter immensely. You know that being someone's witness is a profound gift. So maybe with Tyler, you don't try to recreate what you had with Patricia. That was specific to you and her, but maybe you can create something different. Maybe you can be the person who makes his daily grind feel a little less lonely, not by forcing friendship, but by paying attention, by being present to someone else's ordinary life, because that's what we all need, really. Not grand gestures, just someone who notices we're here, doing our best, day after day. Someone who treats our ordinary struggles and small victories like they matter. Patricia gave you that gift, and now you get to pass it on. And that's our show for tonight. 2 stories, 2 very different experiences, but both asking the same thing. How do we find meaning in the spaces where we spend most of our lives? How do we stay seen or learn to see ourselves when the people around us don't quite get it right? To the person standing outside the closed door, you're not invisible. Richard's blindness doesn't define you. Find the people who see you clearly and build your story around them. And to the person missing their Patricia, reach out. Say thank you. Tell them what it meant. Those quiet relationships deserve to be acknowledged, even if it feels awkward, even if it doesn't fit any category we have a name for. Thank you for spending this time with me tonight. If you have a story sitting heavy on your heart, send it our way. Sometimes the first step to figuring things out is just saying them out loud. Next time on Radio Theater, we'll explore stories of unexpected beginnings, the moments that changed everything without us realizing it until much later. Until then, take care of each other. Pay attention. Leave a cookie on someone's desk. Open a door for someone who's been knocking too long. This is Radio Theater. Good night.